Today I'm removing the intake manifold and rocker cover on the 2.4 D5 engine. This is on the recent XC90 purchase that I will be using for towing. Unfortunately, it's leaking oil from the rear of the engine. Just at the rocker cover where it meets the block, and it's been replaced before and a new gasket has been fitted, but I'll have to investigate why it's still dribbling out of the back of the engine. Now, I have done half of this job before, which is good because it means that I'll be able to learn from my own mistakes and advise better. So, starting by removing the engine cover. Now, I need to remove the sway bar. You can either remove this nut and bolt, or you can remove these two bolts, which is a little bit easier because you can't drop the nut if you undo these two bolts. And this nut and bolt here, pinching the top engine mount. Now, the reason we need to remove it is the engine mount is bolted through the rocker cover, so the mount itself has to be removed in order to remove the rocker cover.
14 mils at both ends. And both sides of this are 18 mil.
Pull the breather hose out of the way. Originally this won't have a Jubilee clip on, it'll have a sealed, I don't know what you call them. Just pull that out of the way. You need to remove the high pressure fuel pipes. The unions on these are 15 mil on both ends, so fuel rail end and the injector side. Remove the intake pipe between the EGR plenum and the intake manifold. Removing the intake pipe makes it easier to get to the central union on the high pressure fuel pipes. So you'll want to remember this when tightening them up as well, because quite often after doing a job like this, this is the one that people tend to end up having left loose, and it'll seep diesel out. Oh, God. Now, these are supposed to not be reusable. However, I've reused them many times and not had any issues. So to prevent over tightening, what I would do is tighten them up first after reassembly, but not too tight, and check them for leaks once the engine is running and tighten if necessary, rather than going too tight straight away. Disconnect the fuel return pipes, remove the little clips. So remove the wiring for the injectors. Also disconnect the wiring for the cam position sensor. Remove the bolts that are holding the harness to the top of the engine. So I think that originally these would all be T30 Torx screws, but some of them have been replaced by the previous owner. And you can just tuck the harness out of the way, because all we need is this area here. So now if you're just removing the top part of the intake manifold, you don't need to pull the injectors out, you don't need to remove the engine mount yet. So I'll just show you this part being removed. You'll have T30 Torx screws going all the way around the edge and in between the injectors, and then you've got another 6 in the middle. These 4 have been replaced with 10mm, but they would usually all be T30 Torx screws. So this manifold has already been off and resealed with silicone, so it might be pretty well stuck. But what we'll try and do is find an area to insert a tool. So whilst I would prefer to use plastic tools, the intake manifold has been stuck down so much that I'm having to use one of the metal tabs. So in areas there are metal flanges that overlap, which would allow you to pry the manifold up without damaging the mating surface. And I've got one here on the left hand side, which I'm just going to stick a screwdriver into, but not push it in so far that it goes in the mating areas. I've really stuck this down. So providing all the bolts are out of the threads, there they are. So this has obviously been off before, as if it hadn't, this would be this coke and sludge would be much thicker. So if we didn't need to remove the intake manifold, or the top half of the intake manifold, then we'd only need to remove the front four bolts that are going straight through the top of the intake cover and into the head. So now we've got, each injector has got two 10mm bolts, a 10mm bolt on each side, holding it in position. Don't drop the bolts in the ports. That's not good. Not good. Make sure you've got a magnet on hand. This has saved me so many times. Now, a lot of injectors on cars will be seized solid into the engine, but I've never had a Volvo injector on a D5 that's too stubborn for me to remove without just basically putting some mould grips around this metal part. So being careful not to damage this top plastic part, just a pair of mould grips around here. And just rock it from side to side. And I've never ever had one that's stuck, unlike on other engines, although on this occasion I am missing the, oh no, nope, it's there. Even the copper injector washer has come up with it. So before I carry on removing the rocker cover, I just want to go into the injector and the copper compression washer, which is on the mating surface of the injector. Now, these are single use. In the past, I've tried to reuse them, which was a massive mistake, and I've over tightened an injector bolt before, so much that it's stripped the threads and I've had to tap and insert a thread insert. What you need is a brand new set of copper washers. Now you'll notice that this is a Vauxhall Opel part number, and when I've rang up the motor factors to try and get one and cross-referenced this part number, it's exactly the same part. So you can either ring Volvo, where they'll be just over £3 a pop, or these were £3 including VAT each, so you'll be looking at 15 quid for all 5 injectors. So continue and remove the remaining 4 injectors. Bit oily, that one. That'll be where I've spilt oil. Topping up the oil. And just check that you've got all the copper washers, because if it's come apart and it's left in the top of the engine and you put an extra washer in, then the injector won't be seated in the right position in the cylinder. So now to remove the engine mount, we've just got 3 14mm bolts, one on the rear left and a 10mm bolt at the front here. You can tell these have been out before, but this mount is new, so yours may not come out so easily. So now we've got the engine mount removed, all we've got are the bolts going round the edge. So on this one they are 10mm bolts, but they should be T30 Torx screws, but at least it makes them easier for you to see with them being shiny 10mm. You've got some down the back that you might not be able to see. So remove all of them. So I've got all the bolts out of the way on the rocker cover, but I'm just this leak off pipe here that goes back into the high pressure fuel pump. I'm just going to loosen it and turn the union out of the way so I don't want to risk damaging this pipe here. So now we've got all the bolts out, we've got the leak return pipe moved out of the way, got the engine mount removed. We can lift up the whole rocker cover and remove it from position. And what I can do now is check why I've got an oil leak with a brand new gasket. So I am wondering, it doesn't look that there's any debris or anything in the way. It may have just been under tightened, so I'll just lift up this gasket, just check that there's no debris underneath. So what you'll need to do is clean up the surfaces the best you can, make sure that there's no metal deposits or debris on the mating surfaces, and it may help to add a little bit of silicone gasket maker when refitting. I'm unsure why this one was leaking, but I'll reseal it and put it back together. A quick trick when refitting the diesel return lines is you can stick the clips back on the top of the injector before refitting the connections, and then all you need to do is press down on the connections so the injectors are all tight, but just hand tight. They don't need to be too tight. I was using a short ratchet like this, just a small short ratchet, and they're just hand tight. I'm not using much effort at all. Tightened all the high pressure fuel pipe unions, hand tight with a short spanner. So now I'm going to run the engine and check that there aren't any leaks before retightening if necessary. Take a little bit of turning over just to fill the fuel lines, but no bleeding is necessary. What you'll find, if you have got any leaks, is you'll get a significant smell of diesel from the engine bay, and you might not be able to pick it up on the camera, assuming there actually was any. You'll be able to see little wisps of diesel coming out around the injectors, and you'll get like a haze above the engine, but it's looking like I've managed alright. You see these areas on the injectors would get damp, a little bit like that, but that's from removal. And same here, you would see wet areas where the diesel is escaping. So that's job done. No more oil leaks, and as far as I can see, no diesel leaks. Sorry I missed the refitting of the gasket. I was in a bit of a rush, so I couldn't particularly go through everything regarding putting it back together. But I put a bead of silicone around the intake manifold and used a very small amount of silicone on the gasket, which had already been replaced. I've got a feeling that this corner of the rocker cover could have been tightened a bit more. The leak was down the back here, so it's possible that it could have been tightened more, but either way, it's been removed. I know it's been fitted properly now. When refitting the injectors, I would suggest putting a torch down and checking that the seat is clean, and for every hole, what I did was I stuck a microfiber cloth on the end of a screwdriver, the corner of a microfiber cloth, and twisted it around at the bottom of the injector seat just to clean off the surfaces. So that's it for this job. I'll be doing plenty of other jobs. I've got the aircon pump to do on the V70, and there'll always be another job to do, so keep a lookout for my other videos, and thanks for watching.